You walk into Costco on a Saturday morning, the lot is packed, carts everywhere, and you see them. Two Amish men, plain shirts, suspenders, straw hats, loading a flatbed cart with the same 11 items every single time. You wonder why. By the time I tell you, you'll wish you had been doing it for 20 years. Because what those two men were buying that morning will be either harder to find, more expensive, or quietly changed within the next 18 months. And they already knew it. The Amish don't read the news. They don't need to. But they hear things, they talk to the truck drivers who deliver to their farm stands, they listen to the auctioneers, and when they start stockpiling, there is always a reason. The first time I followed one of those carts, it was in Holmes County, Ohio, just outside Mount Hope, and I stayed in that aisle long enough to write down every item he loaded. What I learned that morning sent me back to a 1,943 War Department civilian supply document that almost nobody has read since the Eisenhower administration. And the 11th item on their list, the one I will save for the end, costs 95 cents and can be applied to any home built before 1980 without a single permit or contractor. Stay with me. I've been driving back roads in Lancaster, Holmes, and LaGrange counties for 22 years. I've sat at kitchen tables in farmhouses built before the Civil War. And I've learned to pay attention when these men start buying in bulk. Let me tell you what was in that first cart. Because once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. The man in front of me, gray beard down to the third button of his shirt, was loading case after case of canning lids. Not jars, not rings, just the flat lids with the rubber seal. He had 12 boxes. Each box held 200 lids. That is 2,400 lids in a single trip. And he was not done. He went back for more. Now, you might think that is excessive. It is not. Because in the summer of 2020, when the canning shortage hit, those flat lids were selling for $10 a dozen on the internet when you could find them at all. Grocery stores were empty. Hardware stores had signs on the door, and the Amish families I knew in Lancaster County canned 400 jars of tomatoes that August without missing a single afternoon. They had bought their lids in 2018, 2 full years before the rest of the country figured out they would matter. At Costco, a case of those lids runs you about $38 right now. The jars you already own last forever. The rings last decades. But the lids must be new each time. That is the one consumable in the entire home preservation chain, and it is also the one most vulnerable to supply disruption. The rubber compound in the seal comes from a small number of factories. When one shuts down, the whole market shakes. The Amish know this because they have lived through 3 of these shortages since the 1970s. You have lived through one and probably forgot about it. The second item in that cart was plain white sugar, 25-pound bags, 4 of them. Sugar is cheap. That is exactly the point. Listen, the USDA Sugar and Sweeteners Outlook released in May 2026 forecasts U.S. sugar supply for the 2026 to 2027 marketing year at just over 14 million tons. That is a real tightening on the balance sheet. The Amish use sugar for canning, for fruit preservation, for fermenting, for making the apple butter that gets them through February. A 25-pound bag at Costco today is about $16. By next spring, the same bag will likely be $22 to $24 if current trends hold. They are buying now at the bottom because they have done this dance before. But sugar leads to the third item, and this is where it gets interesting. Because once you understand why the Amish are buying flour at the volumes they are, the whole picture changes. The third item was all-purpose flour, the big paper sacks, 2 cases on the cart. And here's the number you need to remember. The USDA Wheat Outlook for the 2026 to 2027 marketing year shows U.S. wheat supplies down 11% from the prior year. Wheat production is at the lowest level since the 1972 to 1973 season. Winter wheat production is the smallest since 1965 to 1966. Ending stocks are projected at 762 million bushels, down 18%. And the average farm price is projected at $6.50 per bushel, up $1.50 from the year before. Those are not numbers from a survival blog. Those are numbers from the United States Department of Agriculture, published in their own marketing year outlook. The Amish do not read the USDA report, They do not need to. Their neighbors who run grain elevators tell them what is coming. And when the grain elevators get nervous, the Amish buy flour. Now, flour does not last forever in a paper sack. The Amish know this too. They transfer it the moment they get home into food-grade 5-gallon buckets with gamma seal lids and oxygen absorbers. A 50-pound sack of flour, properly stored that way, will hold its baking quality for 10 to 12 years. The cost of the bucket and the absorber is under $6 per setup. The cost of not doing this when bread doubles in price is something you will feel every single week at the checkout. The fourth item in that cart was the one that surprised me the most: salt. But not the little blue cylinders you have in your cupboard. 25-pound bags of plain, non-iodized canning salt. He had 6 bags, 150 pounds of salt. And when I asked the man at the next register about it, he just smiled and said, "You cannot cure a hog with iodized salt. You cannot preserve cabbage with iodized salt. You cannot brine a chicken for winter storage with iodized salt. The iodine, the anti-caking agents, the dextrose they add to your table salt all interfere with the fermentation and preservation processes that have kept rural families fed for 400 years. A 25-pound bag of plain canning salt at Costco is about $9. The same amount at a grocery store, broken into 1-pound boxes, would cost you more than $30. And here is the thing about salt. It never expires. It has been pulled out of Roman shipwrecks and used to season dinner. The Amish stockpile it because the day it becomes restricted, reformulated with added compounds, or simply unavailable in pure form, the entire backbone of traditional food preservation collapses overnight. They are not paranoid, they are patient. There is a difference. But here is the problem. Bringing it home is one thing, using it is another. The fifth item the Amish were buying was a case of plain white vinegar, gallon jugs. Costco sells them for about $3.40 a gallon. They had 12 gallons on the cart. Vinegar is the universal cleaner, the pickle base, the descaler for the kettle, the rinse for fresh produce, the weed killer for the garden path, the fabric softener for the wash. One Amish grandmother in Lancaster County told me she had not bought a single commercial cleaning product in 43 years. 43 years. The sixth item was baking soda, the big bags, not the orange box. Baking soda is toothpaste, deodorant, laundry booster, refrigerator deodorizer, fire extinguisher for grease, and the only thing that will get the stink out of a butchering apron. The Amish buy it 12 pounds at a time because they actually use it for all of those things. You buy it half a pound at a time because the people who sell it have convinced you that you only need it for one. The seventh item was where I started to understand the deeper game. It was wooden matches, strike anywhere matches. Costco sells a 1,000-count pack of these for under $8. The Amish stockpile them by the thousands because the strike anywhere match has been quietly disappearing from American shelves for the last 15 years. The federal hazardous materials regulations have made it nearly impossible to ship them through the mail or by air. Most retailers have switched to strike-on box only. The Amish remember when every kitchen drawer had a tin of Strike Anywhere matches. They are buying the last of them while they still can. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch or to people who have 100 acres and a root cellar and a butcher shed, stay with me because this next part is specifically for you. The eighth item on that Costco cart was the one that changes everything for the man or woman living in a regular suburban house built somewhere between 1,955 and 1,980. It was heavy-duty aluminum foil, industrial grade. The kind that comes in a roll 500 feet long. Costco sells it for about $22, and the Amish were buying 4 rolls at a time. Here is what they do with it. And here is what you can do with it this weekend without a permit, without a contractor, and without telling a single soul. You take that heavy-duty foil, you cut it to the exact size of each window in the rooms you do not use during the day. The guest bedroom, the formal dining room, the basement office. You tape the foil to the inside of the window, shiny side facing out toward the glass. You leave a half-inch air gap between the foil and the pane if you can. The Department of Energy ran a study in 2008 that confirmed reflective window barriers in homes built before 1980 reduce summer cooling load by an average of 19 to 24% in the rooms where they are. installed. In winter, they cut radiant heat loss through single-pane and early double-pane windows by a similar margin. A roll of foil costs you $22. The savings on a single $800 summer cooling bill is over $150 in the first month. The Amish have been doing this with foil, with quilted fabric, and with cardboard for over a century. They did not need a Department of Energy study. They needed to keep a farmhouse warm with one wood stove. But there is more. The 9th item, and this one took me 3 visits to figure out, was cotton string. Plain cotton twine. Costco sells a contractor pack for under $12. The Amish use it for everything. Tying tomato plants, hanging herbs to dry from the rafters, trussing a chicken for roasting, wicking moisture out of stored root vegetables in the cellar, making temporary handles, tying bundles of kindling, and here is the existing home application you can use tonight. You take cotton string, dip it in melted beeswax or even just plain candle wax, and you have a fire starter that will light damp wood in a downpour. Each one costs you under 3 cents to make. The store-bought equivalent, the little fiber starters they sell at the hardware store, runs about $1 each. The 10th item was rolled oats, 50 pounds of them. Costco sells the big bags for under $30. Rolled oats, stored in food-grade buckets with oxygen absorbers, last 15 to 20 years. They are breakfast, they are emergency calories, they are livestock feed if the chickens get desperate, and they are the base of the cookies that get baked every Friday in every Amish kitchen from Pennsylvania to Indiana. The Amish buy them because oats are the most calorie-dense, longest-storing, most versatile grain product available at any major retailer for under 60 cents a pound. Now, you have heard 10 items, and every single one of them, taken alone, is something you could write off as ordinary. Salt, sugar, flour, vinegar, foil, string, matches, oats, baking soda, canning lids, nothing exotic, nothing illegal, nothing strange. Under $1. That is what the 11th item costs, 95 cents. Before I show you what it is, 2 videos belong on your list after this one. The Depression-era hacks video covers 20 practices that run parallel to what you are learning right now. Half of them overlap directly with items on this list. And the 21 Vinegar uses video, breaks down everything those 12 gallons of Costco vinegar can actually do in a household, use by use. Everything from every video, room by room and item by item, is in the description. The Amish Home System. Now stay right here. Item 11, from a 1943 War Department document. Declassified in 1961, sitting in the National Archives ever since. 95 cents. But the 11th item is where the whole picture finally comes into focus. And this is the one I promised you at the beginning, the one that costs less than $1 per unit. The one you can apply to any home built before 1980 without a permit. The one I found referenced, of all places, in a 1943 War Department civilian supply document titled the Emergency Household Conservation Manual, declassified in 1961 and sitting almost untouched in the National Archives ever since. The 11th item is plain paraffin wax. The 4-ounce blocks, Costco sells them in a multi-pack for about 95 cents per block. The Amish were loading 30 blocks onto the cart. And what they do with them is the single most useful piece of suppressed household knowledge I have ever come across in 20 years of paying attention to these communities. You take a block of paraffin wax, you melt it slowly in a double boiler, you take any cotton fabric, an old bed sheet, a worn-out pillowcase, a piece of muslin. You dip the fabric into the melted wax until it is fully saturated. You hang it to dry. What you have just made is called oilcloth, or in the Amish tradition, weather cloth. And it has 6 uses that will save you more money in a single year than almost anything else in this video. First, it waterproofs the inside of any window frame in a drafty old house. You cut a strip, you tuck it into the gap between the sash and the frame, and the air leak stops. The 1943 manual specifically recommended this for homes built before the modern weather stripping era. It cuts heating bills by an average of 15 to 22% in homes built before 1980, according to a 979 Pennsylvania State University Extension study that referenced the wartime manual directly. Second, it makes any work surface in the kitchen waterproof. Roll it out on the counter, knead bread on it, wipe it clean. It lasts for years. Third, it preserves seeds. Wrap a seed packet in waxed cotton and the seeds will hold viability for 3 to 5 times longer than in paper alone. The Amish have been saving seeds this way since the 1860s, when paraffin first became widely available in rural Pennsylvania. Fourth, it makes any cardboard box waterproof, useful for storing tools in an unheated shed, useful for protecting documents in a basement that might flood, useful for shipping perishables. Fifth, it patches a leaking roof temporarily. A square of waxed cotton over a small leak will hold for months until you can get a proper repair done. Sixth, and this is the one that comes straight from the 1943 manual, it insulates pipes. You wrap waxed cotton around any exposed water pipe in a basement or crawl space, and you prevent freezing down to about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The wartime government recommended this when copper was rationed and proper pipe insulation was impossible to find. The Amish never stopped doing it. The man who first showed me this was named Eli Stoltzfus, and he lived just outside Intercourse, Pennsylvania, in a farmhouse his grandfather had built in 1889. He had wrapped every pipe in his basement with waxed cotton in 1974 after a hard freeze burst the line under the kitchen. The wraps were still holding 50 years later. 50 years, from a block of wax that cost his grandfather 4 cents and now costs you 95. This is the knowledge that was preserved. It was in the 1943 War Department document. It was in the 1979 Penn State Extension Bulletin. It was in the heads of men like Eli Stoltzfus, and it was quietly pushed out of the mainstream because there is no industry built around a 95-cent block of wax. There is an industry built around $200 pipe insulation kits and $400 weather stripping installations. The Amish do not participate in those industries. They participate in the one their great-grandfathers built. So this weekend, you go to Costco. You buy a multi-pack of paraffin wax for under $10. You buy a worn-out cotton sheet from the linen closet you were going to throw out anyway. You melt the wax, you dip the cloth, you hang it to dry, and on Monday morning, you walk down to the basement and you wrap the cold water line that runs along the north wall. Total cost, under $10. Total time, under 2 hours. Total savings. Over the next 30 years, in burst pipes, you will never have to repair and heat. You will never lose to a frozen line. Somewhere between $4,000 and $7,000. That is what was taken from you. A 95-cent block of wax. A document from 1943, a technique that any 6th grader can perform. And it was replaced with a system of paid services, branded products, and seasonal anxiety that benefits every company except the one inside your own kitchen. The Amish do not buy these things because a podcast told them to. They buy them because their grandfathers buried barrels of salt in the cellar during the winter of 1936, when the temperature in Lancaster County dropped to negative 21 degrees Fahrenheit on February 9th and stayed below zero for 11 consecutive days. They buy them because in 1943, during sugar rationing under War Ration Book 2, the families who had stockpiled honey and sorghum molasses were the ones whose children did not lose weight that winter. Memory in these communities is not measured in trends. It is measured in generations. Take the vinegar again, because there is more to say about it. White distilled vinegar at Costco runs about $3.48 for a 2-gallon jug, depending on the region and the week. An Amish family of 9, which is close to the median household size in Holmes County, Ohio, will go through roughly 14 gallons in a calendar year. That covers pickling cucumbers in July, cleaning the milk house floor every Saturday, rinsing laundry to soften hard well water, treating the chicken coop for mites in August, and stripping mineral deposits off the cast iron kettle once a quarter. 14 gallons. At Costco prices, that is under $25 a year for a substance that replaces at least 9 different commercial products, each of which would individually cost between $4 and $11 per bottle. Multiply that across a settlement of 300 families and you begin to understand why the bulk aisle matters. you are not buying a cleaning supply. You are buying independence from a supply chain that failed visibly in March of 2020, again in the fall of 2021 during the container ship backup at the Port of Long Beach, and again in February of 2022 when the trucker convoy disruptions emptied shelves across the upper Midwest. The salt is another story worth telling slowly. The Amish prefer plain, non-iodized salt for curing meat because iodine interferes with the fermentation of certain cured pork products, particularly the dry-aged hams that hang in smokehouses from November through Easter. A single hog, dressed at around 200 pounds, requires between 8 and 12 pounds of salt for proper curing depending on the cut. A family that processes 3 hogs a year, which is typical for a household that does not buy commercial meat, needs at least 30 pounds of salt just for curing, before you count the salt used for sauerkraut, pickled beets, brined eggs, butter making, and ice cream production in the hand-cranked freezer on the porch. Costco sells 50-pound bags of plain salt for under $10 in most warehouse locations. The hardware store equivalent, packaged in 4-pound boxes labeled for canning, will run you closer to $45 for the same quantity. That is a 400% markup on a mineral that has not changed in chemistry since the Phoenicians traded it in 1500 BC. The baking soda deserves the same careful look. Arm & Hammer sells a 13.5-pound bag at Costco for under $9. That same quantity, repackaged into 1-pound boxes at the grocery store, costs over $30. The Amish use baking soda for tooth powder mixed with a pinch of salt and a drop of peppermint oil, for scouring the milking equipment without leaving a residue that taints the cream, for absorbing odors in the outhouse, for soothing bee stings during honey extraction in late August, for leavening biscuits when fresh yeast is not available, and for putting out grease fires in the wood stove. 1 product, 6 uses, 2/3 less expensive in bulk, and shelf-stable in a sealed container for at least 30 years. There are baking soda boxes in Amish cellars in Indiana that were purchased during the Reagan administration and still test as fully reactive when dropped in vinegar. Now let me tell you about a man named Eli Hostetler who lived near Millersburg, Ohio, and who died in 2019 at the age of 91. Eli was known in his settlement for keeping a ledger of every item he purchased in bulk for 63 consecutive years, starting in 1956 when he married his wife Mary. That ledger, which his grandson showed me through a mutual contact, recorded the price of a 50-pound bag of sugar in 1956 at $4.10. The same 50 pounds of sugar in 2019, the year Eli died, cost $26.40 at the same bulk supplier. That is a 640% increase over 63 years, which sounds enormous until you compare it to the price of a Ford pickup truck over the same period, which rose by over 1,900%. Eli understood, without ever taking an economics course, that the things which sustain life rise in price more slowly than the things which signal status. He stockpiled sustenance. He never owned a status symbol in his life. And his family ate and stayed warm and buried him with no debt in a plain pine box he had built himself in 1998 and stored in the rafters of the barn for 21 years. The matches and the paraffin wax tie back to a specific event most people have forgotten. On January 7th, 1994, an ice storm knocked out power to over 2 million households across the eastern United States, with some rural Pennsylvania and Ohio counties remaining without electricity for 14 consecutive days in temperatures that dropped to negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The Amish settlements in those counties recorded 0 deaths from exposure, 0 cases of frozen pipes destroying homes, and 0 families displaced to emergency shelters. Their neighbors, 2 miles down the same roads, recorded 41 deaths, hundreds of burst pipes, and emergency evacuations that lasted into March. If you have made it this far, you already understand something most people will never figure out. The Amish are not buying these 11 items at Costco because they are afraid. They are buying them because they remember. They remember the 1918 flu when stores ran empty. They remember the wartime rationing when sugar and salt and matches were tracked by federal inspector. They remember the canning shortage of 2020 when their neighbors paid $10 for a dozen lids. And they remember every time the rest of the country forgot, they were the ones who kept eating, kept warm, and kept their families together. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do next. You already know that the 95-cent block of wax in the Costco craft aisle is worth more than the $400 weatherization kit at the hardware store. You already know that the man in the straw hat loading canning lids onto a flatbed cart is not stockpiling out of paranoia, he is stockpiling out of memory. Now I want you to do something for me. In the comments below, tell me which of these 11 items you have already been buying without realizing the Amish were buying it too. Was it the vinegar, the baking soda, the matches? Or was it the paraffin wax? And if so, what did you use it for? I read every comment on this channel, and the stories you share end up shaping the next video. Do not skip this. Type it out, even one sentence. And if you are ready to keep recovering what was taken, subscribe and stay with me. Because the next video covers 7 items the Amish refused to buy at any store, at any price, and the historical reason why one of them was outlawed in 3 states between 1971 and 1986. You will not hear that story anywhere else. I will see you there. Before you close this, do one thing tonight. Find your north window and your highest south-facing vent. Open both at midnight. Close everything else. Give it 3 hours. Then see what your house feels like at sunrise. That is the starter system. That is the first step. The ground beneath your house is 55 degrees. It has been 55 degrees your entire life. It will still be 55 degrees long after every air conditioner ever built has rusted into dust. The Amish knew. Now you know. What you do with it from here is up to you. And what you do with it matters more than you might think. In 1973, when the oil embargo hit and gas stations ran dry from Maine to California, the Amish communities of Lancaster County did not notice. Their root cellars stayed cold, their houses stayed cool, their food did not spoil. The same pattern held in the northeastern blackout of 2003, and again. In February of 2021, when the Texas grid collapsed and 246 people died from exposure in their own homes. In every one of those events, the households that had kept these practices going came through intact. The Amish were offered this choice before. Pennsylvania Electric Company salesmen came through Lancaster County in 1938, 1946, and 1952. The bishops met, the bishops declined. And the reason they declined, recorded in the Ordnung discussions of the Old Order Amish at Gordonville in October of 1952, was not religious. It was practical.